Putin abandons Kursk region, leaving citizens without food and water, prioritizing the capture of foreign territories. I'm Maria Drutska, and today we also talk about the messages Lukashenko received from Putin, including the nuclear threats, of course. I will also discuss with you the severe situation in the eastern front of Ukraine. Exactly 24 years ago, Russia experienced a terrible tragedy that shocked the world. On August 12, 2000, the Russian nuclear submarine Kursk sank in Barents Sea, and all 118 crew members on board perished. This event also marked a turning point in Vladimir Putin's political life and changed Russia's course towards restricting freedom of speech. The course of the rescue operation and the behavior of Russian authorities, particularly President Vladimir Putin, drew criticism in his country and not only. It's worth noting that he had only been in office for 5 months, so Kursk was effectively his first major task. During the disaster, the Russian dictator was on vacation and did not interrupt it immediately after being informed of the accident. He returned from Sochi 5 days after the catastrophe. Critics later claimed that he showed no emotion regarding the death of 118 people. But he faced the most criticism for his response in the interview with CNN's Larry King. When asked about the submarine Kursk, Putin simply said, "It sank," and smiled. You can Google the 9 seconds video. It's somewhat disturbing and disgusting to see Putin smiling while talking about the deaths of 118 people. But anyway, Maria, what does this even have to do with anything? Why have you been talking about the submarine for almost half of the video? Well, since the start of the Kursk operation, it has been 2 weeks, and Russia still haven't managed to assemble necessary forces to repel the attack. According to the Financial Times, instead, the Kremlin has consolidated units from across the country and from less active parts of the front while deploying young conscripts. Military analysts and Russian mail bloggers suggest that the Kremlin has likely deployed several battalions from Kharkiv, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia regions to Kursk. The Lithuanian Ministry of Defense reported that Russians also relocated troops from Kaliningrad. However, the occupying forces in Donetsk remain intact and continue to advance and seize Ukrainian territory. Despite Ukraine's success in the Kursk region, Russian President Vladimir Putin appears unwilling to divert significant resources from the East Front, leaving him with few options. According to Pavel Luzin, an independent senior researcher at the Center for European Policy Analysis, the only substantial reserve available in Kremlin is 300,000 conscripts. Putin has repeatedly stated that conscripts are not sent to combat zones. According to Russian legislation, this is only allowed after 4 months of service when they acquire special skills, although the law can be violated. There is also information about sending spring conscripts who have been in service for less than 4 months to the combat zone in the Kursk region, which contradicts Russian legislation. Social media is filled with comments from conscripts' mothers. For instance, one mother reported that her son swore in just a few days ago on August 11th, and he will be sent to the border from Altai Krai by September or early October. Additionally, conscripts who managed to evacuate from the Kursk border during the offensive are now being forced to sign contracts with the Russian Ministry of Defense to be sent to the front lines, as reported by the Russian opposition publication Verstka. What does this mean? Well, Putin regime has decided to sacrifice conscripts essentially for its own safety. Russian analyst Anatoly Nesmian writes that inside Russia, several million security forces remain untouched because the internal enemy represented by the people appears far more dangerous to the regime than NATO combined. Therefore, it is easier to the authorities to weaken certain parts of the front or border Russia rather than risk weakening defense against this territory enemy. Before I continue, I want to thank all of you guys who send coffees on Buy Me a Coffee and become patrons to this channel. Please do so if you want more of these videos on the channel, and you can also help this channel by subscribing to it. I suggest you also subscribe to my Twitter page where I post regular updates about the situation in Ukraine, videos, photos, and to my Instagram where I show the daily life in Ukraine. Kremlin tries to ignore Kursk operation to maintain positions in the eastern part of Ukraine, but this will not last long. The Kremlin is attempting to ignore the Kursk operation by the Ukrainian armed forces to preserve its position in eastern Ukraine, but this cannot continue for much longer. Ukraine continues to liberate new villages every day. Meanwhile, Russian occupiers, according to analysts from the Deep State Project, are advancing near several villages in Donetsk Oblast. This is typical recent news. Russians are losing their own territory but continue their efforts to press on in eastern Ukraine. What does this mean? For Putin, capturing foreign territories is more important than defending his own, with the Drutska-Pokrovsk direction being a priority for the Russians. That is the western part of Donetsk region. Regarding the situation on the front lines, guys, the Russians are devastatingly using tactical aviation, conducting airstrikes on the territory of the Turets community, regardless of the remaining civilian population. The city is being wiped off the face of the earth, with no resident or critical infrastructure left intact. As of August 18, around 7,000 residents remain in the Turets community, and at least 2,500 people are still in the city itself. The Pokrovsk direction remains the most challenging section of the front in recent months. Russian occupiers are concentrating their forces and resources there. In the frontline Pokrovsk in Donetsk Oblast, there are 59,000 residents. The occupiers are approaching Pokrovsk, and this is less than 10 kilometers left. According to Ukrainian military meat assaults, where the Russians throw infantry, more prepared groups follow after, but Ukrainian armed forces are holding back the advance. But this requires significant efforts, and it's unclear how long the defense forces will be able to hold back the enemy. Some sources report that Russian troops have occupied New York in Donetsk Oblast today. Official information is currently unavailable. Belarusian President Lukashenko made absurd statements about Ukraine. The latest statements from Lukashenko suggest that Vladimir Putin is begging Kiev for negotiations. Lukashenko indicates that all goals of so-called special military operation in Ukraine have been achieved. This is how the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council interpreted Lukashenko's latest message. To translate what Lukashenko said into plain language, it is a signal that Putin is already begging for negotiations, because embedded in Lukashenko's long speech is the claim that the goal of the special operation have already been achieved, wrote the head of the center, Andriy Kovalenko. Lukashenko claimed that Ukraine has already been denazified and that there are no Nazis left in Ukraine. Where did they go? He refers that negotiations between Russia and Ukraine need urgently, and if otherwise, there will be escalation. If we don't sit down at the negotiation table, there will be an escalation. It will end with the destruction of Ukraine, Lukashenko threatened. He also stated that Ukraine has amassed troops at the border with Belarus, believing that Russia might again advance through Belarus. This acknowledges that there was aggression through Belarusian territory. He claimed that he has deployed almost a third of his army to the border with Ukraine because there are allegedly over 120,000 Ukrainian troops there. He said, seeing there Ukraine's aggressive policy, we deployed and stationed our troops along the entire border, as would be done in case of war in defense. Then Lukashenko claimed that Ukraine would be very happy if Russia used nuclear weapons. Speaking about the Ukrainian operation in the Kursk region, Lukashenko said that it is allegedly an attempt by Ukraine to provoke Russia into asymmetric actions, including the use of nuclear weapons. The danger is that this type of escalation by Ukraine is an attempt to push Russia towards asymmetric actions, for example, the use of nuclear weapons. I know for sure that Ukraine would be very pleased if Russia or we used tactical nuclear weapons. It would be a happiness, he stated. Lukashenko added that in the event of nuclear weapons use, Russia and Belarus would be left without allies, as if they have many right now. He also said that the West has already formed a negative image of nuclear weapons, but Ukraine still wants to push towards their use. Well, the image of nuclear weapons was positive for everyone before, wasn't it? Belarusian dictator, seemingly attempting to scare someone, said that Russia would help him if necessary. However, even this sounds comical, since the Kremlin can't even manage its own territory, a portion of which is already controlled by the Ukrainian armed forces. What do you guys think? What these words and messages from Lukashenko actually mean? And is Putin wanting negotiations and talks really? Write me in comments below. That's it for today, and I want to thank all of you for supporting Ukraine, watching Ukrainian content. Please like this video, and if you really liked it and you want more videos like this, you can support the channel's development on Patreon or buy me a coffee. See you soon, and Slava Ukraini!